This week, a holiday special edition of Only in America, where we celebrate improvisation in music and in life for the undocumented. That's Saba Nafees, a PhD student, a pianist, and a dreamer. She's an artist on a new album by critically acclaimed jazz musician John Daversa, American Dreamers, Voice of Hope, Music of Freedom. The album featured 53 DACA artists and was just nominated for 3 Grammys. But music is only part of Saba's story.
My dad, he told us, look, you have to be very careful. You can't do too much in school and other things. You have to lay low and, we really can't be talking about this too much because it can be dangerous. And it was a pretty tough thing to deal with as a teenager, as somebody who's growing up in this country, having all of my friends going to get their driver licenses, things like that. That was something I just wasn't able to do.
From the National Immigration Forum, I'm Ali Noorani with Only in America. Saba Nafees was born and spent her early childhood in Karachi, Pakistan. When she was 11, she moved to Fort Worth, Texas, where her grandparents had applied for the wider family to join them in the United States. When Saba's grandfather passed away suddenly, the green card petition she had filed became invalid, so she was suddenly undocumented. But Saba persevered and remained full of hope. She went to college, became an entrepreneur, and learned the piano. Now she's one of more than 800,000 DACA recipients waiting on pins and needles to see what happens with the program that protects her from deportation. Through her music and her entrepreneurship, she's embraced the movement of campaigners fighting for justice for America's dreamers. I spoke with Saba as she looked forward to 2019. Look, she's a part of a Grammy-nominated jazz band, she's a PhD candidate at Texas Tech, and she's a national leader, all the while improvising her way through the uncertainty of her immigration status. I gotta say, the album that John and all of the artists that you were part of put together, American Dreamers, Voices of Hope, Music of Freedom, is really, really incredible. So, thank you very, very much for contributing and being such a big part of it.
It was an amazing experience, something totally outside of it's related to migration a little bit, but honestly, it was the first time that I was part of a gathering where it felt really hopeful and really, really positive, because usually immigration gatherings are not this hopeful and optimistic. So this was about music and about stories. So it was really, really great.
So we're going to come back to the album. I wanted to actually begin our conversation about you and your story. What was your journey to the panhandle of Texas where you are right now? But how did you get there?
Well, so I was born and raised in Pakistan. I was born in Karachi and then moved to Lahore when I was around 5 or so. And then when I was 11, I moved to Fort Worth, Texas, to the United States, because my grandfather had been living here since the late 80s, early 90s. He and his wife, my grandmother, and my aunt and my cousins were born here. So we had, family here. My grandfather wanted to apply for my mom and us so that we could come over and reunite with them. So he did just that. We actually got our petition approved for our green card, and then we eventually moved over back in 2004 when I was 11, almost 12. And unfortunately, though, by the time we were moving in and adjusting, my grandfather actually passed away because he had been dealing with a lot of health issues around that time. And right as we were coming in here into Texas, we lost him, unfortunately. But my mom was able to be here the night before he passed away. So anyway, for a couple of years, we kept renewing our visitor visas because we were trying to figure out how to deal with that petition that my grandfather had started. But unfortunately, we learned that everybody that we talked to across the state, and we met with a lot of attorneys, they said that we really couldn't do much because our petitioner was dead. So the petition died too. So after a couple of years of living here with our visas, we ended up becoming undocumented.
Yeah, what was the conversation like with you and your family when you realized that you were now undocumented?
We actually never really had that deliberate conversation. It was more like, this is just how our life is. And we all knew that's how it was going to be. I knew it from the very beginning that we were going to end up being undocumented. I didn't really know all the details and all the negative aspects and negative consequences of that. I just knew that that's what was going to happen. And so my dad, he told us, look, you have to be very careful. You can't do too much in school and other things. You have to lay low, and, we really can't be talking about this too much because it can be dangerous. And it was a pretty tough thing to deal with as a teenager, as somebody who's growing up in this country, having all of my friends going to get their driver licenses and going to the DPS and driving and going to college visits and things like that. That was something I just wasn't able to do. So it was a tough time, I think, just making peace with being undocumented.
How did you stay motivated?
I don't know. I think it's the American dream, the American story. I mean, my father always told me, as long as you work really, really hard and you always try to achieve different opportunities and reach for the stars, I mean, this country will really propel you. And things are fair here, and you just have to trust in that, and you have to believe that if you keep working hard, you're going to get there. You're going to get where you're supposed to go. So I think that really motivated me, and I just loved learning. I loved, going through the educational system here, although it was much behind what I was used to coming from Pakistan. I had gone to a British private school, and the education there was at a higher and different level. But here, at least, I was able to have lots of great friends, lots of great teachers who taught me so much, and really made me who I am today. So I got to participate in many things, including learning how to play the piano, singing, playing tennis, all these different things. I'm not sure if I would have been able to really do much outside of studies if I was still back in Pakistan, which is good or bad, I don't know. It was just many different doors opening every single year I was here and as I grew. So it was a very positive thing.
What led you to learn the piano? What led you to become a jazz pianist?
Well, so I remember in 6th grade, that was the first year I officially started school here. I had come back in 2000 when I was in 2nd grade and just spent the summer here. But really 6th grade onward is when my schooling began here in the country. And I remember in my music class, my piano teacher played Beethoven's For Elise. And I was like on a baby grand. And I was like, oh my gosh, first of all, I want a baby grand. Second of all, I want to be able to play this. I want to be able to read music, to learn. It was just beautiful. And so I was taking piano lessons. And of course, I didn't have any money. So what I did is I ended up just falling into, in a way, entrepreneurship when I was in 6th grade. I just fell into tutoring math and science and different things to students around me and students in our community, in our masjid, in our mosque. So I just started doing that, and that's how I made money. And then I was able to pay for my voice lessons and piano lessons and tennis lessons, and I was able to continue feeding into those talents.
So I have to say, I'm a terrible musician. I'm very good at very few things, but I do remember, when I was young and I played the drums, and I remember, at one point I kind of figured it out, and I was like, wow, that actually sounds like it's supposed to sound. Right?
Great.
So what was that like? What was that moment for you?
Oh gosh, I don't know. It's kind of tough, in the beginning, especially when you're dealing with a weekly basis. You're trying to figure out if you have the money that week to pay your teacher or something like that. You sometimes feel discouraged because you're not sure if you can continue practicing and continue gaining the necessary education for your instrument or voice and things like that. So it can be discouraging, but honestly, you just got to keep going. I was just fascinated by classical music, by jazz music, by music in general. And And I have to practice. If I can't practice, if I can't improve, then I'm not going to go anywhere. So it was an interesting journey, but I think that being young at that age, you really find sometimes you can set aside and compartmentalize probably a lot more effectively, and you can really focus in on what you want to do. So I think that's how it was for me.
So you had said that the message from your father when you realized that you were going to be undocumented was to lay low. How did you arrive at a place where you said you were going to, add your voice to the immigration debate? What led you to that place?
Yeah, so actually, after I finished high school in Fort Worth, I came to Texas Tech here in Lubbock, which is where I still am. I have built this close connection to West Texas and the people and the community here and the region here. So actually, when I was a sophomore/junior around that age in college, I had many great mentors who encouraged me to share my story. This is back in 2012 after DACA came about, and they said, we need to hear your voice, and we think your story is powerful, and there aren't a lot of people in this region and at this university sharing their stories in this way, and you need to start doing that, and we will encourage you, we'll help you along the way. And so that's how I started, actually. On the fall of 2012, I remember sharing my story for the first time at a gathering at the Honors College, and then I had many reporters come and talk to me, and they wanted to touch on the fact that I was an Asian American. I wasn't of Hispanic origins, and they wanted to really showcase that story to everybody in this region, because a lot of people in this region, sometimes I feel like they're just not around enough of us advocates or activists, and they can learn, and they have the ability to learn and listen and to understand if only we share. So I started doing that. That was back in the fall of 2012, and then also in 2013, I continued doing that. And then in 2014, in the spring, I remember that we had a TedX conference here that we hosted at the university. And my mentors, again, somehow persuaded me to tell my story at the TedX stage. And I was like, oh, okay, sure. So I went ahead and did that. And after that, I think is when it really blew up. And I got to hear great things from people all over the world reaching out and saying really encouraging things, including those who didn't say very encouraging things. But that's when I learned, you got to keep going. And after that, my story was out there. I really couldn't go back. I just kept moving forward. I got connected with the White House Initiative on AAPIs, and they really helped me kind of garner those storytelling skills. This was back in the Obama administration. And then I got involved with the AAPI, Asian American Pacific Islander immigration movement, and then went on a Dream Summer ride in 2015 across the U.S., across the southern U.S. And then I guess ever since then, I just never stopped sharing and learning and just being involved with the movement.
My name is Saba, and I'm a dreamer. I was brought to America at age 11 from Pakistan, and I play piano and sing. DACA stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and this executive order went into effect in 2012. We undocumented young Americans who were brought to this country when we were children are known as dreamers. 90% of us are either students or have a job. Because of DACA, I was able to receive a work permit, a social security number, and a driver's license. Just being able to drive without fear that I could be pulled over and arrested is a huge deal. Because of DACA, I've been able to pursue my education. I'm a PhD candidate studying mathematical biology and speak 5 languages. In September 2017, I learned that DACA was ending. I was devastated.
And in those experiences, have there been one or two that have just surprised you in terms of somebody's reaction?
Sometimes I think during the 2015 Dream Summer travels that we did, we got on a bus and drove from DC all the way to Texas. And I think in some of the southern states, I remember just breaking down, I think, at a couple of points there, because I remember meeting people who clearly just didn't understand or were not even open to listening. So I felt really disheartened. And then also the people I met, it wasn't so much that I got backlash from people, but also just stories and the people I met when they shared, like how they couldn't go to college because they lived in Georgia or something like that, where they didn't have in-state tuition. And they were brilliant, bright kids. And one of my friends, he grew up in Georgia and, since he was like a month old. So I think just having connection to all of these different stories and realizing, oh my gosh, this is insane. Like, we got to do something, this is crazy. I think that's what really touched me the most. It wasn't so much that I got a lot of negative feedback. I mean, that happens a lot of times, but really just meeting those people and hearing their stories and realizing that their limits were set. They lived in a state where they didn't have a lot of resources, where they couldn't go to college. It was very, very disheartening. And I think those experiences continue to propel me to keep moving forward and sharing stories and trying to do what we can in this movement.
Do you feel like your experience as an immigrant, an undocumented immigrant, a DACA recipient, now as a leader across the country, does that inform your art, your music?
Yeah, I think that music is a beautiful thing, something in life and in this world that really connects human beings in general, regardless of our boundaries, regardless of where we come from or our political views. So I think it was very powerful for me to see that connection, especially thanks to this album and the work that was put into it. And, as I met other DACA recipients and dreamers becoming part of this album, it was really, really amazing to see how these stories can connect and that music has no boundaries or borders, right? Like, we can share music, we can make music together, and we don't even have to touch about our immigration status. I think that's the beautiful aspect that music can bring about. I think it's really important that projects like this can continue to happen because it's just one outlet of educating others. Besides civil disobedience and besides marching and besides doing Hill visits in DC, this is just a pure and beautiful way of connecting with others who may not understand where we're coming from.
When they take their earbuds off after listening to all 18 tracks, what do you want them to leave with?
I guess just first of all, relish in the great music. This is some amazing music that has been put together with a lot of effort and energy from a lot of different people coming together from across the country. So just really, let go of anything else that may come to your mind. Just listen. Music, has the ability to really touch different parts of our brain, of our senses, and really allows us to have this feeling of deep human state almost. Think about that. Think about the people behind the music. Think about what it took to bring everything together and to create this final product. And really just enjoy it. The beauty of it, right? It's great music that one can really enjoy. And then, after that, if you're interested, go and look up these people and their stories or learn more about the movement. And that's, if you're inspired to do so, which I hope people are.
Your ice gets cold and they pull up on your fam and your life gets thrown in the system. Never play the victim, always play the fifth. Let them know you hit it with a distance. Like, is this the way to treat an American race?
So now you find yourself in Lubbock, Texas at Texas Tech. What keeps you busy there these days?
Oh, yeah. So it's great. I have been in this community since 2011, since I came to college here, did my undergraduate studies here. And then I am now pursuing my PhD in mathematical biology, and I'm still working on that. So just trying to finish up research and hoping to get done in the next year or two. And after that, I'm not sure. I think I will probably leave Lubbock, even though it's a good city and I've gotten to build a lot of connections with the city and with the people here. So yeah, that's what I'm doing here right now.
Just mathematical biology? I mean, that should have just taken like a few weeks to get that PhD, right?
Yeah, I'm kind of lost right now, but yes, it can happen. I think it can happen. At least that's what my advisor says. It can happen. So I believe in that.
You had mentioned being an entrepreneur at an early age to pay for your music classes, right? For your piano lessons. How have you taken this spirit of entrepreneurism forward as an activist, as a leader, as a student?
I realized that there's a lot going on in our country when it comes to the political and immigration landscape, and helping DACA recipients and friends of mine just one-on-one getting their permits renewed. Sometimes you don't have success stories, right? Sometimes you can't get your permits renewed. Sometimes you really are out of luck. And when you're undocumented, you gotta ask yourself, okay, how can I provide for myself? And the key and the catalytic answer right there is entrepreneurship. What do you do that is a skill that you can market on and you can use it to feed yourself and support yourself? And so it becomes this fight for survival, but also you start on your entrepreneurship journey. And a lot of undocumented young people, they are doing the undocu hustle and they are entrepreneurs, and maybe they don't realize it. It's really great working with Immigrants Rising. I've kind of found this beautiful connection between what it means to be an entrepreneur and what it means to be undocumented.
But there's also a common theme of improvisation, being flexible, being able to improvise at a moment's notice. What you tell me applies to being undocumented and doing the undocu hustle. First time I've heard that term, right? Being an entrepreneur yourself, but also being a jazz musician.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's that really good point you make about impromptu work and about improvising, because a lot of times entrepreneurship entails just being able to iterate on your mistakes, or being able to prototype and iterate and then test and find the results and then go on and apply the process again, right? So that's what entrepreneurship is about. And a lot of times being undocumented forces you to do the same sort of things, obviously jump through many, many hoops to, let's say get your work permit. Or if you don't qualify for DACA, then what do you do? Or you did qualify for DACA in a previous administration and all of a sudden you don't. I mean, things like that happen. So what do you do? Honestly, it's a tough question. So then you ask yourself, okay, I am a designer. I can build websites. I can sell things. I can do this or that. And then you ask yourself, okay, I can work for myself. And that's where you start improvising, and then you learn from your experiences, and then you're able to hopefully support yourself. And I think that's the beautiful journey. There's a lot of setbacks to being undocumented, but then there is a way to really take control of your story and of your journey and really make a path for yourself in this country. I know it's really much harder said than done, but it can happen. And very similar to how music is like, right? Especially jazz. Jazz just kind of allows you to be free. I can only speak from the piano perspective. When you're playing, a lot of times you don't necessarily need to have the music in front of you. You can follow the music line in your head and or in your heart or soul, right? And then you just go with the flow. That's kind of how jazz works sometimes, I think. John could say it much more eloquently than I can. But there's a lot of parallels there between playing music, playing jazz, being undocumented, and being an entrepreneur.
I've got approximately 45 more questions for you, but I think we're out of time. I apologize.
Wow, time goes by fast.
It does. So I have one last question for you. And the question is, or the request, if you will, is to finish this sentence. Only in America, ...
Oh, gosh. There's like a book can be written about that. Only in America can you let your wings fly and really take control of your American journey.
Thank you so much, Saba.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me. This was a great chat.
Saba Nafees is a pianist, a PhD candidate, and a dreamer. The Grammy-nominated album, American Dreamers, Voices of Hope, Music of Freedom, was produced by Kabir Segal and Doug Davis under the direction of the John Daversa Big Band. Look up the album on iTunes, Spotify, or any of your other music streaming platforms, and there's more about Saba and the campaign for DACA recipients at our website, immigrationforum.org.
Support for the National Immigration Forum comes from the James Irvine Foundation, expanding opportunity for the people of California, and from the Carnegie Corporation of New York, established in 1911 by Andrew Carnegie to promote the advancement and diffusion of knowledge and understanding.
Hey, I hope you have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you every week, and we'll be back to you with a new episode of Only in America on January 9th. Only in America is produced by the staff of the National Immigration Forum, with special thanks to producers Regina Medina and Emily Chow, and executive producer Kathleen Farrell. I'm Ali Noorani.